This episode of Ghost Town may contain disturbing or graphic descriptions which may not be suitable for all audiences. Please use discretion while listening.
Don't answer the phone. I'm Jason Horton.
I'm Rebecca Lieb.
And this is Ghost Town.
In August 1995, friends and coworkers Christina Rhodes and Marcia Bratzel were on their shift at a Saybrook Township, Ohio McDonald's when the phone rings. McDonald's manager James Turcotte picks up the phone, talking intensely to the person on the other end of the line. The girls, both minors, are separately asked into Turcotte's office, and Turcotte tells each girl that he's on the phone with the sheriff's deputy. In both cases, the teenagers were handed the telephone and told that a customer's change purse was reported stolen. Then, over the phone, the deputy instructs each girl to allow Turcotte to strip search them. While Bratzel suspiciously agreed to an over-the-clothes pat-down, Rhodes was humiliatingly partially strip-searched by the adult Turcotte, a scared teenager complying with a mysterious person through a phone receiver by way of her own manager. The call to the Saybrook Township McDonald's was one of the first of many requests from a mysterious caller to fast food restaurants all over the United States. Calls that would become a kind of traumatizing social experiment, testing work constructs, gender and age relations, and ultimately demonstrating insane abuse of power. Today we're talking about the Strip Search McDonald's phone scam. The first reported instance of the strip search phone scam also occurred in Saybrook Township, Ohio, just a year before Rhodes and Bratzel's fateful phone call. Two more calls were reported in 1995, one in Devil's Lake, North Dakota, and another in Fallon, Nevada. That same year, a man claiming to be a county deputy sheriff called a Pizza Hut in Starkville, Mississippi, and accused an employee of stealing money from a customer. The manager of the restaurant was called to the Pizza Hut and was asked to strip search that employee. More and more phone calls of this nature started trickling in. All in all, over 70 calls were reported in 30 states between the years of 1994 and 2004. And they would all be fairly similar. A male caller who identified himself as a police officer or other authority figure asking for a manager or supervisor. The caller would then solicit their help in detaining an employee or customer, saying that the employee or customer was suspected of a crime, like theft or drug possession. The caller, again asserting his role as a police officer or investigator, would give the restaurant or business manager a generic description of who he was looking for. Typically, that person was a young woman who was currently employed there. The manager, of course, would recognize at least one of the many young women who worked under his supervision. Keep in mind these jobs were often entry-level, minimum-wage fast food positions, jobs many younger people might hold. Then the caller would ask the manager to search the suspected person. Quote-unquote search would start as a strip search, but might gradually become more invasive and often sexual. Eventually, the situation would escalate and the caller would put the manager in a position where he would do almost anything the caller asked. Spanking, kissing, inappropriate touching, oral sex, and more. These excruciating instances might last hours before the participants of the strip search realized that the person on the other line was not an officer of the law at all, but a random stranger, and their traumatic experience part of a perverse hoax. On December 16, 1999, in Blackfoot, Ohio, a phone call to a pizza parlor from someone identifying as Officer Davis for the Blackfoot Police Department accused a 16-year-old female server of stealing a woman's purse with a $50 bill in it earlier that evening. The caller convinced the manager to strip search the employee and to provide detailed descriptions of her naked body. The incident mercifully ended when a 22-year-old male colleague of the victim came into the office and stopped the search, confronting the caller before they ultimately hung up. On November 30th, 2000, a female McDonald's manager in Litchfield, Kentucky, undressed herself in front of a random customer. The caller had convinced her that the customer was a, quote, suspected sex offender, and that the manager needed to, quote, bait them so that undercover police officers could arrest them. In 2001, the manager of a Hooters in Charleston, West Virginia, told two female employees that a police officer had called the restaurant and reported a stolen change purse. The caller told the women to strip in front of the manager and said they'd arrest them if they didn't cooperate. In December 2001, a supervisor for an Indianapolis area Burger King restaurant strip searched a part-time 15-year-old female employee in front of her coworkers. I'm sure you know where this is going. because a, quote, policeman called in claiming the employee stole a purse. The caller asked for a description of the employee's hair and tan lines during the event. At first, officers didn't believe these calls were scams at all. They just thought the managers were being creepy, manipulative, abusive assholes, illegally wielding their power. But dozens of calls came in over the years, all perversely similar. Because of that, law enforcement began to believe one man was behind the scam. And the man was persistent. By 2004, Burger King, Applebee's, Neighborhood Grill and Bar, and Taco Bell had already all been scammed. And McDonald's had received calls to at least 17 different stores. In November 2002, a manager at a Taco Bell in Statesboro, Georgia, received a call from a detective claiming that a purse had been stolen from the lobby by a young woman who worked there. The manager then proceeded to take their 19-year-old female employee to his office, where he stripped her of her uniform, reading the clothes tags for the caller on the other end, and put her clothes tags in the company's safe. Then the caller told the manager to have the employee exercise before rubbing and inspecting most of her body, claiming to see if any sweat would reveal, quote, green residue on her body, indicating contact with stolen money. In February 2003, a phone call was made to a McDonald's in Hinesville, Georgia. The female manager, who believed she was speaking to a police officer who was with someone from the restaurant's upper management, took a female employee into the women's bathroom and strip-searched her. She also brought in a 55-year-old male janitor who conducted an intimate body cavity search of the woman to, quote, uncover hidden drugs. On June 3, 2003, a Taco Bell manager in Juneau, Alaska, received a call from a man who claimed to be working for Taco Bell, investigating drug abuse at the restaurant. The manager then picked a 14-year-old female customer, whom he believed to have drugs, strip-searched the customer, and made her perform several lewd acts at the caller's request. In July 2003, a Winn-Dixie grocery store manager in Panama City, Florida, received a phone call instructing him to bring a female cashier, who matched a description provided by the caller, into an office where she was to be strip-searched. The cashier was forced to undress and assume various poses as part of the search. The incident ended when another manager entered the office to retrieve a set of keys and was shocked by what was going on. They made their colleagues stop the search and hang up on the call immediately. On December 18, 2003, a call was placed to a Blockbuster video franchise in Bismarck, North Dakota. The caller claimed to be a local police officer, saying an employee at the Blockbuster had committed theft. They asserted that the employee could be searched by a manager because of Blockbuster's special, quote, privacy policy. Then, the female employee was taken to the back office where she was subsequently strip-searched both by the manager and a male coworker. In February 2004, 4 separate Wendy's restaurant branches within Plymouth County, Massachusetts, were the targets of a strip-search phone call hoax in the course of one single night. All of this is absolutely horrible. Thankfully, the strip-search McDonald's caller would soon be stopped, but not before one last horrific incident. We'll talk about it after the break.
Hi, hello, how are you doing?
Hello.
We're checking in.
How's it going out there? Is it
in the free world?
Okay. Yes. In the free and open, beautiful world out there.
It's a free market.
It's true. It's true. Everyone's doing their thing.
How are our free market capitalists doing today?
That's good. We're in a little socialist bungalow here and just wanted to bridge the gap.
Comrades.
That's right. That's right. We are your comrades. Don't ever forget it.
We want to say hello to anyone who's listening, supporting us, spreading the good word of Ghost Town.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much.
We want to say a good old-fashioned hello to our government.
Absolutely. Always.
Without which we would not know what we'd be. Would we even plug anything in? Would we know?
No. What would we be doing this for?
We have statues of them, just like our comrades.
That's true. We got busts, we got pillars, we got amphorae with their faces carved in. You should see this place.
We got tasteful artwork.
Oh, always.
The mayor's, whose favorite capitalist movie is Money Train, featuring the 2 people that are in the movie Money Train. I don't know who's in it, but it's called Money Train.
There's money in it and there's a train. What else do you need?
To know who's in it other than that. That would be Ashley Matson.
Hello.
And the next mayor, whose capitalist movie is Moneyball. There's Jonah Hill.
Sure. Is that even about Capitalism?
It's about money balls.
Fair.
You know?
Good.
I think it's about baseball, from what I remember.
Yeah, money and balls. What else do you want?
To know who's in it.
Oh.
That'd be Cat Joselle.
Hello.
Next capitalist movie mayor is... I'm going a different direction. Brewster's Millions. You familiar with that movie?
I am familiar
with
that movie.
Love that movie. Great movie. It's depending on what side you are, it's both pro capitalism and also pro is money important?
Wow.
The answer is yes. That's Richard Pryor is in that one.
Okay, good. We're getting there.
That's Kelly Meehan.
Hello.
Our next capitalist movie. For a Fistful of Dollars.
Oh,
the
spaghetti Western.
Yeah.
This is an interesting journey you're taking us on.
Probably Clint Eastwood.
Yeah, no, that's right.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. Well, that'd be Casey Weber.
Hello.
And our governor, who, baby, has her face on the money.
That's right. She is the money.
She decides whether it's inflation or deflation.
Yeah, she's like, you want it in Taylor Swift tickets? Sure thing.
Why not?
Yeah.
Her capitalist movie? Hollywood itself.
Oh, the longest movie.
That would be our governor, Avian Noble. If you want no ads, no chit-chat, bonus episodes, just the good stuff, 7 days free. Check in, check out, or stick around and support us. Whatever.
Sure.
Patreon.com/ghosttownpod. I do have an Apple Podcast review or two. Appreciate you and your podcast, 5 stars. Thank you for finding these fantastic tales. I look forward to these each week, and I really enjoy your quote-unquote checking in breaks as well. It's a nice balance of comedy and drama. That's bamcabin.com, our friend on Instagram.
Yeah.
Check out Bam Cabin, BAMCABIN in the US of A. Bam Cabin always is liking posts and stuff like that. I notice. Really, I appreciate.
I agreed. It keeps us going, believe me, because we need stuff to keep us going. I'll just say that.
Unraveling the Unexplained. Must subscribe. 5 stars. Ghost Town Podcast is an absolute gem for anyone who loves a good mystery.
Oh.
With historical depth, Jason Horton and Rebecca Lieb are a dynamic duo, seamlessly combining their passion for paranormal experiences and weird historical events. Their storytelling is top-notch, and they manage to strike the perfect balance between thrilling and educational. Each episode takes you on a thrilling adventure from deserted amusement parks to the darkest true crimes in history. Did we write this? Sometimes I think, is AI like kind of taking over and being like, you need a review? I'm never disappointed. If you're looking for a podcast that will keep you on the edge of your seat and ignite your curiosity, Ghost Town Podcast is the one for you. That's at Jensen11 US and Day. So,
oh my God.
If you want to give us a hello on Apple Podcasts or anywhere, please do. If you already have, thank you so much.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be as well written as that.
No, yeah.
Beautiful piece of marketing.
Can that person write our other stuff?
I know. Can we hire you? Please. Not a joke.
Yeah, not a joke. All right, speaking of no more jokes, let's get back to
it. All right, deep breath. We're going to get back in because on April 9th, 2004, a call was made to a McDonald's restaurant in Mount Washington, Kentucky. According to assistant manager Donna Summers, the caller identified himself as a policeman named Officer Scott. Officer Scott asked for a slightly built young white woman with blonde hair, whom he suspected of theft. Summers believed his description was for a woman named Louise Ogborn, an 18-year-old church-going high school senior and former Girl Scout. Louise Ogborn had taken the $6.35 an hour position after her mother lost her job to help out her family. Quote, "He gave me a description of the girl, and Louise was the one who fit it to the T," Summers said. At that point, Ogborn had worked at the McDonald's for 4 months and was a model employee, responsible, hardworking, not one reprimand. At the time, she was currently working her shift. The caller issued an ultimatum. Ogborn could be searched at the store as the police were on their way, or be arrested, taken to jail, and searched there. So Summers brought Ogden into an office and ordered her to remove her clothes, which Summers then placed in a bag and took to her car, as instructed. Embarrassed, the teenager put on a restaurant apron to at least partially cover herself. Kim Dockery, another assistant manager, also witnessed the search. Dockery herself believed she was there as a witness to an important police search for important stolen items. Dockery left after an hour, and Summers told the caller that she needed to get back to work. The caller then told Summers to bring in someone who she trusted to assist, so she asked a cook named Jason Bradley to help her. Summers put Bradley on the phone with the caller, who told him to remove Ogborn's apron and describe her. Bradley refused to do this and immediately left the office. Summers then called her own fiancé, Walter Nix Jr., to help watch Ogborn, and he did, eventually getting on the line with the caller. For the next 2 hours, Nix watched the nude, petrified teenager while surveillance cameras recorded the whole thing. Quote, "I was bawling my eyes out and literally begging them to take me to the police station because I didn't do anything wrong," Ogborn said later in a deposition. Quote, "I couldn't steal. I'm too honest. I stole a pencil one time from a teacher and I gave it back." Obeying the instructions of the caller, Nix removed Ogborn's apron, the only thing she had on, and ordered her to dance and do jumping jacks. Nix then ordered her to insert her fingers into her vagina and have him examine it. He also ordered her to sit on his lap and kiss him, which Ogborn flat out refused to do. Then the caller told Nix to spank Ogden until she promised to do so, and he did. The caller also spoke to Ogborn and demanded she cooperate or terrible things would happen to her. Recalling the incident later, Ogborn said, "I was scared for my life." After Ogborn had been in the office for 2.5 hours, she was ordered to perform oral sex on Nix. Summers returned to the office periodically, and during these times, Ogborn was instructed by the caller to cover herself with the apron. The caller then permitted Nix to leave on the condition that Summers would find someone to replace him. After Nix left the building, he called a friend and told him, quote, "I have done something terribly bad." At that point, it was the dinner rush and Nix had just left, so Summers enlisted Thomas Sims, the McDonald's maintenance man, who had stopped in for a dessert. She told Sims to go into the office and watch Ogborn, but as soon as Sims entered the room, he didn't like what was going on, refused to go along with any of the caller's demands, and left. At this point, Summers herself became suspicious and calls a higher-level manager, whom the caller claimed to have spoken to previously. When Summers calls the higher-up manager, she is shocked. The manager had been sleeping and hadn't spoken to anyone, let alone a police officer. She realized the weight of what she had done to her poor employee, and as soon as she realizes this, the caller abruptly ends the call. Another employee dialed star 69 before another call could ring in, and Summers gets the number of the caller's telephone. Summers is now hysterical, apologizing profusely to Ogborn, who is wrapped in a blanket and after 3.5 hours, finally released from the office. The police are called and arrest Nix for sexual assault, while simultaneously trying to find out who made the long, horrific call to the restaurant. At one point, Summers said later, she asked herself why it was taking so long for police to show up. The Mount Washington PD was less than a mile away. But, quote, "When I asked him questions about why," she said, "he always had an answer." According to her attorney, Summers also watched the surveillance tape later that night and broke off her engagement with Nix. After a simple internet search, Mount Washington police realized how many similar incidents have happened like this over the years. Using the star 69 callback information, police determined that the call has originated from a supermarket payphone in Panama City, Florida, using an AT&T phone card. The largest retailer of these phone cards was a Walmart in Panama City, who had already been contacted by a Massachusetts investigation into the caller. This East Coast investigation pinpointed the purchase of another phone card at another Walmart. Using the records of the Panama City Walmart, which showed the cash register and the time of purchase of the phone card, Mount Washington police were able to find surveillance camera footage of the purchaser and of the card. The Massachusetts investigation had gone cold when their surveillance video failed to show the purchaser, but somehow the Mount Washington police had it. It doesn't make any sense to me why Mount Washington would have it and Massachusetts wouldn't, but okay. The purchaser in the Panama City video was wearing a correctional officer's uniform for like a private security firm, and the man in the uniform is seen buying both cards. Videos and still photographs from the two Walmarts where the two cards were purchased were compared. The man is identified as David R. Stewart, a husband with 5 children, who is arrested soon after. Detectives also find other telling things as they search Stewart's home, another phone card that was used to call 9 restaurants involved in the scam, and dozens of applications for police department jobs, hundreds of police magazines, police-style uniforms, guns, and holsters. Clearly, this man was the mastermind of the hoax, and clearly, he wanted to be in charge. Stewart was extradited to Kentucky to be tried on charges of impersonating a police officer and solicitation of sodomy. On October 31st, 2006, he was acquitted of all charges. The evidence, especially not having a direct recording of Stewart's voice, likely led the jury to a not guilty verdict. Louise Ogborn, the Mount Washington victim, underwent therapy and medication to address post-traumatic stress disorder and depression. She decided not to attend the University of Louisville, where she had been accepted and anticipated becoming a pre-med student. In an interview with ABC News, she said that after the abuse, she felt dirty and had difficulty making and maintaining friendships because she couldn't, quote, allow anyone to get too close to her. While Stewart was not found guilty, after his arrest, all strip search McDonald's phone scam calls mysteriously stopped. Or maybe not so mysteriously. Okay, but we do get some justice. Donna Summers was fired from the McDonald's for violating corporate policies prohibiting both strip searches and for allowing a non-McDonald's employee to enter the restaurant's office. Summers entered an Alford guilty plea to a single count of unlawful imprisonment as a misdemeanor and was sentenced to 1 year probation. Kim Dockery was transferred to work at another location. Walter Nix pleaded guilty to sexual abuse, sexual misconduct, and unlawful imprisonment and was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Rhodes and Bratzall, the two girls from the opening of this episode, subsequently sued for molestation and severe emotional distress, one of 3 other lawsuits related to the strip search phone call scam. I don't know how these cases ended, but I believe they settled out of court. Donna Summers also sued McDonald's, asking for $50 million for failing to warn her about the previous hoaxes. Summers was awarded $1 million in punitive damages and $100,000 in compensatory damages. In 2009, the Kentucky Court of Appeals upheld the jury's verdict, but reduced the punitive damages award to Summers to $400,000. Louise Ogborn sued McDonald's for $200 million for failing to protect her during her whole ordeal. Ogborn was rewarded $5 million in punitive damages and $1.1 million in compensatory damages and expenses, plus legal fees. Ultimately, the jury decided in Ogborn's case that McDonald's and the unnamed caller were each 50% at fault for the abuse that Ogborn was subject to. It's a controversial thought. Who is really to blame? But what I wonder is, will this type of scam ever happen again? Hopefully not, due to more modern technology, but also restaurant policy. After the court decisions, McDonald's revised its manager training program to emphasize awareness of scam phone calls and protection of employees' rights, which should have happened, obviously, in the first place. To me, this is not wholly about who is at fault, though of course I think there was a lot of blame to pass around, but the dangers of trusting institutions. We place so much trust in authority in general, too much trust, revering who we think is in power and obeying them to a fault, wherever they reside, be it a corner office, wearing a shiny uniform, or on the other end of a telephone.
Strike!
Tell me something I don't know, Ump.
Well, unlike that nasty curveball, there aren't any surprises when you finance your next car with Carvana. You get real terms personalized for you right in your strike zone.
Really?
Steeride!
How am I supposed to focus when you're telling me about Carvana?
Well, Slugger, you gotta keep your eye on the ball. Just like you can keep an eye on your customized down and monthly car payments.
I can customize those?
He's out and on his way to finance his next car with Carvana.
Visit Carvana.com or download the app to get pre-qualified today. We'll drive you happy at Carvana.
To those who visit Mickey D's for their favorite breakfast item and then go somewhere else for coffee, give this Mickey D's brew a second chance. The glow up was real.
Try any size iced coffee brewed with 100% Arabica beans for just 99 cents until 11 a.m. And pair it with a savory sausage McMuffin with egg for $2.79. Prices and participation may vary. Cannot be combined with any other offer.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
We hope you enjoyed the podcast. Thanks for sticking around. We think you'll really enjoy this next recommendation. Keep listening to discover more great content.
You're listening to Smokescreen, Betrayal on the Bayou. Before you dive in, if you want to listen to the whole story uninterrupted, you can. Unlock the entire season ad-free right now with a subscription to The Binge. That's all episodes, all at once. Unlock your listening now by clicking subscribe at the top of the Smokescreen show page on Apple Podcasts, or visit getthebinge.com to get access wherever you get your podcasts.
The Binge.
It's been a hectic morning. Man called me this morning to get on a train to D.C.
Chad Scott is heading to an appointment at the DEA's Office of Professional Responsibility, OPR. It's the DEA's version of internal affairs. Chad has pissed off a lot of people in his career. Some have waited years for Chad to get in trouble for something. It'd kill to hear Chad face the music. The Drug Enforcement Administration is notoriously secretive. They wouldn't tell us anything related to Chad's case. but we've got the tapes from that room at the DEA's headquarters in D.C. Thanks to our sources, we're a fly on the wall.
I've been here before. I didn't get it started.
It's February 2016. A cold, windy day in D.C. Chad's an intense guy. He's blonde, blue-eyed, built like a boxer. Chad's the kind of guy you can tell immediately he's a cop. He's got a high and tight haircut. His eyes are always roving. He often looks pissed. Whatever the cop look is, he has it. Chad's not just any cop. He's the star in the New Orleans office of the DEA. He's an award winner, and he has years of outstanding performance reviews. In an agency obsessed with stats, he's the guy bringing home the bacon. He's well-connected, too. Chad's friendly with politicians, even a few country music stars. But getting summoned to D.C. like this means only one thing. You're in deep shit. They tell Chad they're going to put him on leave for 10 days.
To preserve the integrity of the DEA and actually for your own protection.
To preserve the integrity of the DEA and for his own protection. Because as of yesterday, 2 guys on Chad's team had been arrested. They were both handpicked by Chad himself to work with the DEA. And they were caught selling drugs and stealing money. Now Chad's being told he's under investigation.
This is bullshit. I've been at this too long. And I've never been accused by one defendant of any of this shit. Ever. And I arrest more people than anybody in New Orleans. And I'm disgusted.
The feds want to find out if Chad was in on their scheme and what else he might have been up to in nearly 2 decades of service. But Chad's not going down without a fight. He dares the feds, the Office of Professional Responsibility, to come after him.
Listen, investigate away. I want somebody independent to investigate this. This is all about shutting me down. That's all it's ever been about. Because I work fucking circles around them. This is a professional attack.
Chad thinks he's being called in because jealous coworkers ratted him out. Because when you get all the awards and you don't mind rubbing it in, you might win some friends, but you're gonna make enemies too. They tell Chad not to contact informants, they take his badge, and they tell him to book a flight back home to Louisiana. It's the worst trouble he's ever been in. But when he leaves the building, he's a free man. For now. Federal investigators are going to be digging deep into his record. And that was no small task. Chad was a prolific agent who specialized in walking a thin line. But now, investigators would be deciding what was okay and what was flat out illegal. Chad's cases made headlines. The DEA ignored red flags. They ignored warnings from within for 17 years. See, Chad is a Rorschach test. His actions invite interpretation and opinion. You look at his career and you might see the greatest DEA agent in the South. Or you might see a criminal. Some people say the ends justify the means. Getting drugs off the street means you have to be willing to get your hands dirty. Sometimes you've got to bend the rules to get around bureaucracy. Chad was the epitome of that mentality. He bent rules and he twisted arms. It's an old DEA adage. You don't find informants sitting in church. And for some, that's okay. Because all's fair in this war on drugs. I'm Feynman Roberts.
And I'm Jim Mustian. From Neon Hum Media and Sony Music Entertainment, this is Smokescreen, Betrayal on the Bayou. Episode 1, The White Devil. Feynman and I started following this story as it unfolded in 2016. We were working together for a newspaper called the New Orleans Advocate.
My beat was local government. One morning, I got a call from a source who told me there was a shakeup at the New Orleans office of the DEA. Everyone was talking about it. I immediately called Jim. He covered federal law enforcement. That call set us on this journey, chasing sources and working obsessively.
2016 was insane. Absolutely insane days. We'd work late into the night, or we'd come back from a source meeting and, just not wanting to drive across the lake. I would crash in Feynman's guest room.
Always welcome. Still welcome, by the way.
It didn't take long before we started noticing some patterns. One name in particular kept coming up. Chad Scott. Wherever we went, people kept saying his name. We talked with anybody who might have come in contact with Chad. Colleagues of his at the DEA. People he'd intimidated or put behind bars. We talked to agents, attorneys, drug dealers, anybody we could get a hold of. People were telling us that the FBI had been there asking about Chad just days before we got there. One agent met me at a hotel bar around D.C. and brought me a duffel bag full of documents. Meanwhile, the DEA wouldn't even confirm that Chad had ever worked for the agency. The DEA's mission is to enforce our country's drug laws. Their agenda is broad, and as I found out covering them, there's not a lot of public information about what their agents are actually doing. The agency, though funded by taxpayers, operates under a veil of secrecy called the Privacy Act. That's a law that keeps agents' personnel records behind lock and key, inaccessible even to FOIA requests. But the DEA goes beyond that. No press is good press for the DEA. They comment on next to nothing, especially when one of their own agents has stepped in it. Chad Scott was known from the streets of Houston to Atlanta. Drug dealers feared him. Federal prosecutors loved him. But other agents told us he broke the rules, told us he had a huge web of snitches, not all of them on the books, that the DEA often had no clue what Chad and his team were doing. He was everywhere and nowhere. This was the South's most notorious drug agent we'd never heard of.
Chad's problem in life is the same problem he has everywhere. He's just better than everybody else at it, so he follows his own rules.
I heard Chad's dirty. He sets people up and robs them and does dirty things and stuff.
His only other passion besides putting people in jail is water skiing.
Being arrogant and having a little bit of hubris has never been a federal crime. Should it be, we'd all be in trouble.
I said, Chad Scott's a dirty motherfucker. He says, what do you mean? I said, I'm telling you, Chad Scott's a dirty motherfucker.
As a reporter, every now and then you dig up a story that feels dangerous to keep in your notebook. You feel paranoid, that kind of eyes in the dark feeling. Like maybe word has gotten around you're working on an explosive piece, and not everyone likes it. There's an old saying that news is what somebody, somewhere, wants to suppress. This was one of those stories. If half the things we heard about Chad Scott were true, it would spell nothing short of a scandal for the DEA. It could wreak havoc on drug cases in New Orleans and free dozens of drug traffickers Chad had helped put behind bars. It was around this time when we were knocking on doors, catching the ghost of the FBI investigation, that strange things began happening. And even today, I'm not saying it can't be explained away by my own paranoia. I'd get these calls where I'd hear deep breathing on the other end of the line, or they'd say my name and hang up. I could swear I was followed one night going home from the gym. One of our sources told us to check the undercarriage of our cars for trackers. Then there was a time when I came back to New Orleans from D.C. when the front door to my apartment was wide open and I found papers everywhere. This isn't something we reported to the police. I'm not even sure we told our editors about it. The last thing you ever want is somebody saying you've got to take some kind of precaution that'll prevent you from reporting.
There were some papers that we had related to this story that we were worried about. And Jim called me and goes, listen, it looks like people went through some of my stuff. And I was like, okay. And he goes, but it looks like all the stuff for whatever story we're working on is still here. And I was like, oh, well, and are you okay? And that was kind of, where we were. Chad was a guy who had so much lore behind him. Everybody had strong opinions. Either he was the most effective drug cop ever, or he was a betrayer of the badge. When we wrote a profile of Chad for the paper, we called him the tan blonde boss of the single ski.
That's Feynman's line for the record. Those words are going to be on Feynman's tombstone.
Jim has given me shit about it ever since. Back then, Chad liked to boast to suspects that he was the baddest motherfucker along the I-12 corridor. It wasn't just talk. One dealer offered $15,000 to have him executed. The Houston rapper Scarface name-checked him in a song. Chad liked to play it during busts. People said he's like Denzel Washington from that movie, Training Day. Comfortable on the streets with drug dealers, somebody who colored outside the lines.
You got today, and today only, to show me who and what you're made of. You don't like narcotics? Get the fuck out of my car, go back to the office, get a nice pussy desk job, chasing bad checks or something, you hear me?
But some people he worked with for decades said, above all, Chad is tireless. He has a near photographic memory. He can talk to anybody and get them to work for him. In the New Orleans DEA, Chad Scott was a legend. He had power, influence, and he didn't mind letting you know it. Because whatever you think about his tactics, Chad was really fucking good at his job.
My grandmother was murdered, likely with a candlestick.
I really think it's somebody that knew her.
My family tried to find the killer.
A psychic got involved.
And asked, what if it was one of us?
She did this.
It's my hometown's greatest mystery.
There's nothing people in the Delta like better than a good story.
From Campside Media and Sony Music Entertainment, this is Witnessed, Devil in the Ditch.
Did you ever think your life could be this awesome?
So you literally get paid to travel, is that it?
A new fiction podcast.
There's this strange couple following us.
We need to know who they are. We need to go on the attack.
I told you!
Charlie, what's happening?
Tagged, coming April 1st.
My husband and I are in danger.
Subscribe on Apple Podcasts to binge all episodes.
If I were you, I'd go back home.
Or listen weekly wherever you get your podcasts.
We're travelers. We don't have a home.
Nobody knows Chad better than Skip Sewell.
What's happening?
Hi.
How are you, man? How are you? Yeah, good to see you.
Skip knows the DEA inside and out. He was there as Chad rose to become the agency's overachiever, but he was also there for Chad's fall from grace. He's Chad's longtime friend, colleague, and occasional supervisor. Late 50s, blonde, tall, has kind of a Robert Redford vibe. Used to be a baseball player. Now he's more of a golfer.
I guess so. Yeah. I guess so. Hey, good. How are you?
I met him in his home with Feynman and our producer, Odelia.
Hi, so nice to meet you.
Skip's house is in a quiet cul-de-sac in Beauchene. It's a gated neighborhood just across Lake Pontchartrain from New Orleans. Beauchene is a golf course wrapped around a golf course, full of 80s houses and a mishmash of architectural styles. It's a neighborhood of professionals, attorneys, doctors, and federal law enforcement agents.
This friggin' neighborhood is so insane.
Oh, come on.
Do you realize what it's like trying to... I mean, I had the Google, but Skip, I had to make 25 turns.
Yeah, it's a huge neighborhood. It's got two golf courses, and I mean, the houses go all the way to the river. And
Skip worked at the DEA for 27 years. When we wanted to tap a recurring expert, we knew who to call. For 2 decades, Skip worked alongside Chad.
I used to be the legend until Chad Scott came into town. I remember one time this guy called me from jail, and I got arrested, and he said, Skip, man, I hate to even tell you this, but you ain't shit anymore. I'm like, what does that mean? He goes, man, all these guys in here, all they talk about is Chad. They say talk about Chad, whether he arrested him or not. They sit around here and talk about him all day. I'm like, are you serious? He goes, yeah. His phone number's written on the wall.
They met in the mid-90s, when Skip worked at the DEA and Chad was a deputy at a local sheriff's office. Skip found out right away that Chad is the kind of guy you want with you when you're in a tight spot. Skip's setting up a deal with his team to catch a mid-level drug dealer. This is a guy with a long criminal record that includes burglary and gun charges. Getting violent guys like him off the street was one of Skip's missions at the DEA.
The old 924C charge, which is carrying a firearm during a drug trafficking offense or a crime of violence, is probably one of the most often used charges in the federal system. To me, satisfaction was getting a guy off the street that was involved in a number of violent crimes, and you locked him up and sent him away. I think that's the greater good, more so than the guy that's just dealing drugs.
But Skip and his team's plan has one problem. They don't have enough manpower to carry off the deal. So a colleague recommends some help. A young guy who works at the sheriff's department. It's Deputy Chad Scott.
The deal was set up at a Ryan's Steakhouse.
Ryan's is a buffet-style chain. Nothing fancy. Lit like an operating room. It's the kind of place where no one will notice if you walk in or out. Skip, Chad, and the team are hiding in cars nearby. The agent and the informant go in to wait for the dealer.
When the dealer showed up, the undercover agent all of a sudden realized, I know the dealer, and the dealer knows I'm a cop.
The undercover agent scurries out the back door while the dealer comes in the front. But they still want to do the bust. Another agent on the team volunteers, but he isn't prepared. He's wearing typical work clothes for a narcotics agent, like a polo shirt. Not exactly the right getup for going undercover.
And when he went in and sat down with the drug dealer and the informant, the drug dealer was, who is this guy? What is he doing here? Is he a cop? The drug dealer did not want to do the deal. He was upset. He was furious. And pretty much anything that could go wrong had at that point.
But somehow the informant talks the dealer into going through with it. They head to the parking lot. When the dealer opens up his car to show the informant the cocaine, that's when they move in to arrest the guy.
He saw us coming like they always do, and he did what they typically do, and he took off running.
Skip takes off after him.
And I was running through the parking lot, chasing the dealer into this wooded area, and I turned to my side and I looked over, and Chad was running side by side with me.
The dealer knows he's about to get collared, so he's got nothing to lose. The other guys, these are DEA or task force agents, they're nowhere near the action. And here's Chad, who at this point isn't even DEA, chasing down this guy like it's his job. They follow the dealer through the woods until everyone, the drug dealer and Skip and Chad, give out. They can't run any further.
And he turned around, and when he faced us, he had a gun in his hand. And I'm fumbling to try to grab my gun because when I started running, I put it up and I had my hand on it, but I didn't have it out. Well, fortunately for Chad and I, he turned and threw the gun into the woods. We grabbed the guy, and although he surrendered, he didn't surrender, and a fight ensued, and it got pretty ugly out there. And I still remember looking at Chad out there, and we didn't have to say a word. We both knew we could have very likely been shot.
That night, after they book him, Skip and Chad go and have a couple of drinks. Get to know each other. Skip likes what he sees, so he recruits Chad to work on a DEA task force, which is a kind of partnership between local law enforcement and the DEA. After his promotion, Chad doesn't let up, and he doesn't let Skip down.
He was competitive as a task force officer, which you don't often see. And what I mean by that is, usually a task force guy comes over and he's cutting his teeth. He's trying to figure out the federal system. How do we do complaints and affidavits and search warrants and so forth? Well, Chad hit the ground running.
Skip and Chad are making a ton of busts on a case they're working together.
And it got to the point where it was almost like a competition. I would have a deal one day, and after we arrested him, I'd go down to court for the initial appearance of the defendant. I'd come back, and Chad would have a deal the next day. And we arrested probably 45 drug dealers. And it got to the point where our supervisor would tell us, hey, we're not doing anything today. You're slowing down. You're going to take care of the paperwork before we go out on anything else. Get the bad guy no matter what. That's was Chad's motto.
Skip and Chad became good friends. Skip was best man at Chad's wedding.
Chad is, or was, tenacious. I've never seen anyone that had that fire, that wanted to work all the time. I mean, he couldn't even eat lunch without informants calling him. And you see a lot of guys, they look at their phones and they just set it down. Chad answered almost every call. He'd work weekends, nights, holidays. It didn't matter to him. This was his life. It consumed him.
Chad is the guy who always picks up the phone. That's why Chad's cell phone number was written on jailhouse walls. Chad can get you out of a tough situation if you give him what he wants. That if is what this whole story is about. With all this initiative, talent, and drive, a colleague gave Chad a new nickname.
It was just a joke. The guy worked in our group with us on the task force. We were all good friends, went to lunch together, hung out together. At the time, Chad mainly worked crack cocaine cases, and most of the dealers were black dealers. So obviously he was arresting black people. It was given to him in jest. It was a joke. We laughed about it. It wasn't anything that was serious. It was a black NOPD officer who started off calling him the devil, the white devil.
To Skip and Chad and their buddies in law enforcement, it may have been a joke, but it wasn't for those on the other side of the law, especially people of color. If you wound up on Chad's radar and he had something on you, you might find yourself under his thumb for years. Never convicted, but not exactly free either. Having to bargain for your own freedom at any price.
On August 23rd, the summer event Ahsoka arrives on Disney+. Witness the thrilling adventure of former Jedi Knight Ahsoka Tano as she uncovers a disturbing new threat to the galaxy far, far away. Don't miss the 2-episode premiere event of the highly anticipated Star Wars series Ahsoka, streaming August 23rd, only on Disney+.
Coming down the runway, the all-new Galaxy Watch 6 Classic from Samsung. A large, easy-to-read screen, a rotating bezel for quick app access. Go ahead, give us a spin. Amazing! And look at that model, so well-rested, thanks to advanced sleep coaching.
And the arms, courtesy of fitness tracking.
Galaxy Watch 6 Classic, the style you want, the innovation you need. Get yours now at Samsung.com.
Requires smartphone with Android 10.0 or later and 2 gigabytes of RAM or more, and Samsung Health App version 6.22 or later.
Not everybody who was dealing drugs would deal with Chad. Virgil Ard knew some of Chad's informants. He'd seen how Chad operated, and he was wary.
Chad was on another level, more or less, like, seemed like he was, like, coming here straight targeting all the black drug dealers. You know, he came to destroy the black community. Now, I'm not saying he didn't arrest any white males or white females, but you didn't hear about Chad arresting any white people.
Why do you think that is?
Because he's that devil that he calls himself, the white devil. Very arrogant, very arrogant.
Virgil drives trucks for a living, and he's working on a criminal justice degree. He's stocky, with an open face, has a neatly trimmed beard that's more salt than pepper. He looks like a sitcom dad. But back in the 90s, Virgil was a drug dealer. He knows what it's like to be hunted by Chad. Virgil first met Chad in the mid-90s.
At that time, he was riding in a green Camaro, and he was the new officer on the scene. I guess he must have heard that I was one of the new guys that was on the scene selling drugs or whatever. So I guess he was wanting to meet me, and I was wanting to meet him. More or less to be like, okay, you the cowboy and I'm the Indian, or vice versa, you know. So, but the first encounter was right here in front of my mom's house, you know, and he didn't really say anything to me, but he just let me know that he was on my trail at the time.
We talked to Virgil in the home he grew up in. If Louisiana's a boot, Chad's turf in this story takes place in the toe box. Virgil's childhood home is in a working-class neighborhood of Hammond, about half an hour west and a world away from where Skip lives. It's a small house with red shutters right next to a railroad track. Growing up, Virgil was good friends with the kid across the street. On the weekends, they'd cut each other's lawns, play Atari, practice karate. That friend's dad was a detective with the sheriff's office.
Mr. Carey can get into the business and find out whatever is stolen, whatever somebody did or whatever, and he could bring it to the forefront. He took care of the neighborhood. Even growing up, I didn't have issues with the police, From the minute I got driver's license and all, I was okay.
Virgil did have one problem. He never had enough money. In college at Grambling, he sold a little pot here and there, but Virgil ended up dropping out because he didn't make enough to get by.
I mean, I look at other kids from other states, and I always wonder, who was backing them? How did they have money? How did they afford it?
Virgil worked a couple of dead-end jobs, but he wanted to find a way to make a living on his own terms.
Growing up, trying to be a young man and looking at life and what life has to offer, and to earn a living without going through all the hassle that you have to go through, quote unquote, they would say on a white man's job, or whereas you're going to be paid the bottom of the barrel, the minimum wage. You won't have the amount of money that I would say the normal family would have. It just wasn't working out,
In the early 90s, Chad busted a bunch of crack and cocaine dealers from Virgil's neighborhood. They went to prison, so there's a void in the market for a dealer. And Virgil knows a guy in New Orleans who needs to move product.
The money, it came so fast selling crack, With people, I guess, smoking weed, it was more or less like for joy times, just getting high. And, it wasn't nothing that gave them the urge to hurry up and go get some more. But the crack had a craving to it, to whereas they was getting money from everywhere, and being able to be that supplier. And once I really learned how to cook the crack myself and not put no additives to it to make it what they call blow up or anything like that, I always cooked it pure enough to make my customers enjoy it. So they was looking for me.
In a way, it's like any other small business. He has product, clientele, and he's finding ways to reinvest. And soon enough, Virgil's clients aren't the only ones looking for him. That's how Virgil comes to know Chad intimately.
So back in, 1997, Chad pulled me over, got me out the car and, with his pistol drawn. And Chad was like, where the drugs at? I'm like, man, I don't have no drugs on me, which I didn't. And he ended up pulling my pants down all the way on my ankles on the streets while people passing by and everything, because he was so adamant, so sure that I had some drugs on me. He got all underneath my car, all under the fender wells, and pull out all my CD cases, everything, my trunk, hood. He went through my car from front to back as if he knew for sure that I had drugs, and I didn't have a crumb of nothing with me.
Is that a pretty busy road?
Yeah, it's right near Hammond Junior High. It seemed like people was coming, passing a funeral procession or something, and different people saying, you all right, you all right? I'm like, yeah,
And were you all right? I mean, what did it feel like to be standing there with your pants down?
Well, actually, that part, that was embarrassing for the simple fact that you got my pants down on my ankles, you know what I'm saying? Actually, search my crouch and put your hands all on my penis. So it was crazy, you know what I'm saying? Because he was so sure that he had me at the time based on the cat and mouse game, and which I didn't have anything. So after that, he just pulled my pants up and let me go.
And it's worth mentioning here, Chad categorically denies that this event happened. And that kind of discrepancy is something we deal with a lot in this story. When you have multiple sides of the law, people disagree on facts. Still, even if it did happen exactly the way Virgil laid it out, it wasn't illegal. In fact, strip searching a suspected drug dealer, that's routine for drug cops. It's not misconduct. But for Virgil, it was humiliating. After Chad lets him go, Virgil contacts his lawyer, who sets up a meeting with Chad's supervisor at the sheriff's office, a deputy named Chicken Gorman. Not an important character here, but great name, right? Anyhow, Chicken makes a promise to Virgil.
He said, you won't have no issues out of Chad anymore. And for a long time, I didn't.
Not to give Deputy Chicken too much credit, Chad was headed for bigger things. He became a full-time DEA agent. Chad was sent to the Houston office, so he's off everybody's necks on the North Shore.
I'd say it was a better time for guys at the time while he was off the scene, being able to sell drugs and not have nobody. And I'm sure the other detectives worked the area, don't get me wrong, but I guess they wasn't as cocky and arrogant or didn't have as many informants as he had. So I guess other guys got a chance to sell drugs without having the issues or the problems.
Chad was pretty good at what he did.
He was, based on him breaking the rules and regulations. Anybody can be good breaking the rules and regulations. He didn't give a damn about criminal procedure and code. It was about, hey, let me just go get me some Negroes and lock them up by any means necessary.
The money Virgil made dealing drugs enabled him to live the kind of life he wanted to live.
Vehicles and trips all around the world and land. And then, like they say, had the shoebox of money at the time and actually got into 18-wheelers, driving. So, like they say, got it out the mud.
And the shoebox refers to where you kept your cash?
Yeah, that's at one time, yep. Till I learned better.
Under your bed?
Till I learned better.
In 2006, Chad and his informants finally get Virgil. Virgil says that the charges were trumped up, more drugs than he'd had at the time, and a charge for brandishing a firearm, a subsection of the old 924C charge. Virgil says he didn't brandish it. The gun was a couple of feet away in a clothes basket.
And I'm saying, well, I know I was a drug dealer at the end of the day, but I wasn't guilty of the amount of drugs that he had, and I wasn't guilty of brandishing a firearm.
His case goes federal down in New Orleans. One day, Virgil's sitting in jail when he's pulled out for a meeting with the arresting officer. The prosecutor, Maurice Landreau, will be there too. Virgil's lawyer tells him that this is going to be about helping himself. That's code for becoming a snitch. Snitch, and you get less time.
Maurice Landreau offered me a Coke. I told him, I don't want a Coke from you. And when Chad and them came in, I said, hey, man, y'all brought me here for nothing. Take me back to Orleans Parish Prison.
Virgil's lawyer tells him that he might want to say something to help himself. Maybe Virgil has something to say about his brother.
I'm like, what? About my brother? Man, let me get the hell out of here, man. Get me away from here.
How do you feel about people who served as Chad's informants?
They need to be sent to Ukraine right now today. Send them all to Ukraine with no gun and let them deal with Putin. That's how I feel about them. I hate to say it. So, I pray for Ukraine and what they're going through, but they need to be in the front line of Putin and what he's after.
And just unpack that a little bit for us. I mean, why do you feel that way?
Because, if nobody forced you to sell drugs and you get out there and you do it and no matter what happens, when it comes down on you, you're supposed to be man enough to accept what happened to you at that time and move forward.
And it's more than just that. Being an informant is a blank check. When you get caught, there are sentencing guidelines.
But it's nothing like that tells you anything about being an informant. It don't have a guideline to tell you get 0 months to 12 months if you tell on one person. So therefore, it's based on them to give you a day off or send you home.
Virgil didn't cooperate with Chad. Never became a snitch, informant, rat. He says he pled guilty to the trumped-up charges because Chad threatened to get his wife on conspiracy and put his kids in foster care. Virgil ended up serving 12 years. He was released in 2018. Virgil dealt drugs, so he felt it was only fair to do the time. But becoming Chad's informant, that was something darker.
So he come to seek and destroy. Just like the Bible said, the devil seeks and destroy. And he was just letting us know that he's the white man that come to seek and destroy a black community.
Chad worked like this for decades, winning awards and skating between the gray and black of legality. If you think you know what corruption looks like, this story will turn everything on its head. Some things we found problematic turned out to be completely kosher at the DEA, and some misconduct wasn't enough to land a cop behind bars. This season, on Betrayal on the Bayou, Chad leads a team that racks up success after success.
This group had a lot of seizures. I'm not talking about like 100 kilos here and there, but a lot of money, a lot of quick money, a lot of quick hits, a lot of snitches coming in and out, a lot of blackball snitches. And so how I would compare him was just actually cutting corners.
But eventually, Chad's team would go completely off the rails. We talked with his right-hand man, Carl Newman.
So I want to ask you about this. I got to ask you this.
No, go ahead.
You're a drug cop.
Yep.
Who occasionally uses drugs.
Right.
Mentally, how do you work that out in your mind? Do you ever think, what are you telling yourself?
It'll enter your mind a couple times. It didn't really with the X or the Molly. Now, meth, it would enter my mind. It would.
The FBI will get involved, and they're looking to lock somebody up. Chad's own men will turn on him and talk to the feds.
They had some charges they wanted to put on me. So we got in there and they started reading off charges. And they read and they read and they read more charges. And I'm like, holy jack. And when they got through reading, they also announced that these charges carried 20 years minimum. And it hit me like a maul upside the head. I'm not going to do it.
And Chad will turn from a golden boy to a disgrace.
The case of a former DEA agent accused of falsifying records and taking kickbacks.
This person is former DEA Special Agent Chad Scott. Now, he was once nationally known for his track record as an officer.
He was a very prolific agent. He made a lot of cases, and he had a member of the U.S. Attorney's Office testify for the defense in his behalf.
Overall, corruption was the case prosecutors gave him.
That indictment alleged he falsified records in order to take possession of a seized vehicle. He was also accused of obstruction of justice, perjury, and taking a gratuity in excess of $10,000.
Chad Scott's legal problems are far from over.
But Chad isn't the kind of guy to take this lying down. When the feds called Chad in, his first reaction was rage.
This is bullshit.
His second was to challenge them to conduct an independent investigation.
Listen, Street, investigate away. I want somebody independent to investigate this.
But eventually, after his name was splashed across our newspaper a few too many times, Chad decided the only way to get his story out was to tell it himself for the first time.
My name is Chad Scott. I'm a former special agent with the Drug Enforcement Administration.
Chad Scott sat down with us.
This isn't an 8 to 5 job. There's no hands on the dope clock. It works 24/7.
He spoke with us for hours.
Oh, I understand. I've been found guilty.
And he told us how he ended up in the last place he ever thought he'd be, behind bars.
There's already guys in there beating on the window, screaming my name. Put that motherfucker in here. And so I found, and the guy was walking to that damn pod and grabbed the key. I said, "You ain't putting me in there." And he's like, "What do you mean?" I said, "Did they not tell you who I am?" He's like, "No." I said, "I'm a fucking federal agent. You cannot put me in there."
Unlock all episodes of Smokescreen, Betrayal on the Bayou, ad-free right now by subscribing to the Binge podcast channel. Not only will you immediately unlock all episodes of this show, but you'll get Binge access to an entire network of other great true crime and investigative podcasts, all ad-free. Plus, on the first of every month, subscribers get a binge drop of a brand new series. That's all episodes, all at once. Unlock your listening now by clicking subscribe at the top of the Smokescreen show page on Apple Podcasts, or visit getthebinge.com to get access wherever you get your podcasts. Smokescreen, Betrayal on the Bayou is an original production by Neon Hum Media and Sony Music Entertainment. It was written and produced by Odelia Rubin. It was reported by me, Feynman Roberts, and my co-host, Jim Muschin. Our editor is Catherine St. Louis. She is also Neon Hum Media's executive editor. Our executive producer is Jonathan Hirsch. Sound design and mixing by Scott Somerville. Theme and original music composed by Hansdale Shee. We also use music by Blue Dot Sessions and Epidemic Sound. Our associate producers are Ann Lim and Joshua Moore. Our intern is Zoe Culkin. Fendel Fulton is our fact checker. Our production manager is Samantha Allison. Alexis Martinez is our podcast coordinator. Special thanks to Stephanie Serrano, Mia Warren, Kate Mishkin, and Shara Morris. And to our DEA consultant, Skip Sewell. We couldn't have made this show without the support of our legal team, including Lauren Pagoni, Rachel Goldberg, and Allison Sherry. I'm Feynman Roberts.
And I'm Jim Mustian.
If you're enjoying the show, be sure to rate and review. It helps more people find it and hear our reporting. Thanks for listening.